Happy Wind Down Wednesday. I am Isis with Sistah Scifi, running incredibly late. Um, and today our guests are Michele Tracy Berger, author of Doll Seed, and Mateo Askaripour, author of Black Buck and This Great Hemisphere. It will be an amazing conversation. So I hope you're excited. I'm very excited. I know I'm like 20 minutes late. But while we wait for me to, there's Michele Mateo to join. Let me know how your week has been in the chat. Hi, Michele.
Hello. Let me just get my camera. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, and there's Mateo.
Hello.
Hey.
I don't know why I was running. So I have like this whole story, but we're gonna dive right into it.
It's so good. It's Wednesday. It's Wind Down Wednesday. So
Wednesday. And I'm winding down with a big bottle of water. Let's start with check-ins. How y'all doing this week?
How you doing, Michele?
I'm doing well. It's so lovely to see you. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you. And it's just Mateo and I met in July when he was in Cleveland to talk about this great hemisphere, and just was so lovely to meet. So super excited.
Had a great time. Happy to be here too. Thank you for having me.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you for being here. So everybody already knows who y'all are, but just so we can have it in the recording, I would love to start with self-introductions, and we can do it in alphabetical order so we know exactly who goes first when I stop. So yeah, let's do like self-introduction.
Yeah, Mateo Askaripour. This Great Hemisphere is my second novel. It's speculative, which is why I'm here. There you go. My first novel, Black Buck, came out in 2021, and they're two very different novels, but if people read both, they might see some similarities in themes.
I like that. Michele?
Hey everyone, I'm Michele Tracy Berger. I am an academic and a speculative fiction writer. I write across all genres, so sci-fi, contemporary fantasy, but most of what I write has an edge of psychological horror. And my new short story collection, Doll Seed, just debuted the beginning of the month with Aunt Luke Books. So super excited to be here.
Yay. I love it. So I'll start off with like this. I've never asked this question on live before, but what, if anything, does Afrofuturism mean to you? It's really buzzy right now. I'm definitely here for it, but what does it mean to you?
Okay, I'll take just a quick stab at that. I'm actually teaching a class at Case Western Reserve University where I am, and it's on Afrofuturism and the Black Imaginary. And I told my students, I was like, I want you to come out to be I want you to be more confused by the end of this, because they're coming in with a certain idea, and I was like, we're going to mix it up. So I'll just say, I think it's a big river with a lot of tributaries, and that it is, for me, an aesthetic intervention in the canon and the way that we see Black future, the Black imaginary. And it can mean looking at the past, even though people talk about, race, technology, in the future. It's like we exist in all planes, all spaces. I don't know. You got me feeling cosmic, Isis and Mateo. So I just went there.
I was like, wow, that's like, my mind is blown. I thought I knew what Afrofuturism was. Apparently, I need to take that class and just be super confused. Mateo.
Hey, listen, I was going to say something almost verbatim to Michele. For me, the first thought that comes to mind is infinite Black imagination. Right. Of course, as Michele said, the intersection of race, technology, time, whether past, present, or future, aesthetics related to not just style in terms of art and culture and architecture and all of that, but also literal style, how we look, how we present ourselves, how we perceive ourselves. And, if I were to sum it up in one word, it's just infinite. right? Like as I think more and
Mm.
more, I think that any definition begins to break down because, as Michelle said, it's such a broad term and such an unlimited term. But what I think it's rooted in is the infinite possibilities of our potential and how we perceive ourselves and our power.
Mm. I love that. The infinite possibilities of how we perceive ourselves. I love that.
I was inspired
Um,
by Michelle.
I love the riffing. Um, so then, I mean, we're talking about Afrofuturism and its infiniteness.
Mm.
Infiniteness. Now I don't know if I'm gonna make it bigger or make it smaller. What attracted you to the realm of science fiction and or speculative fiction?
Mateo, you start us off.
All right, all
I
right. We
really,
discussed this
I'm,
in Cleveland. We discussed this a bit in Cleveland, so I know a bit of your own answer. For me, Isis, I didn't go in with this great hemisphere of thinking I'm going to write this speculative novel, right? The idea, the story of this young woman who is invisible, searching for her brother, who is the primary suspect of a high-profile political murder X years in the future, was what first came to me, and not even that fully thought out. It wasn't like that. Like it stemmed from an experience that I had on the New York City subway and just asking myself a bunch of questions that night about invisibility, the feeling of it, what it meant to me, and then making that more concrete in my imagination of what if there were actually a race of invisible people? How did they become invisible? So it started with a feeling, and then the ideas took form after that. And then as I was going more and more with these ideas and jotting down more notes, I said, okay, what genre is this? I guess, what would make the most sense is to call it speculative. But if someone reads this novel, they're going to see a variety of genres interwoven and at times in contradiction. There's crime, there's mystery, there's thriller, a political thriller, romance. There's all of that, but it most definitely also adheres to being a speculative novel.
I agree with that. And I think what I loved about this great hemisphere is you took the hyperbole of actual people who are actually invisible and started it with the reality, like who is most invisible in our current society. And it's people who are like transient or like navigating unhousedness. And like that, the prequel to the novel was like very grounding to me and how we have this person like who is very grounded in so much gratitude and navigating unhoused, being unhoused,
Yeah.
right? And how society is almost like walking through her as if she's not there. So anyway, we can
Yeah.
discuss more.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there.
Michelle, what attracted you?
from the time that I could tell a story, I was telling it slant. And so, I've always been interested in esoteric, the mystical, the magical, the paranormal, even before I knew what those words were. So speculative just means, that things that happen that seem to be right now outside the current reality of what we think of the physical laws of the universe. And so I'll just take people way back. Like when I was growing up, I was watching Lost in Space. I thought Will Robinson was my brother. I made my mother like set a place setting for him. I was all into the Bionic Woman. I like growing up had a lot of those early influences that were like sci-fi and just different. And then the horror piece came in because my mother was a huge horror fan. So I was part of the generation that was watching like really inappropriate things at inappropriate ages, like Jaws at 7 and reading The Exorcist. So I knew the world was a really weird, complex place. And then, as I went sort of growing up and like learning different traditions, like, oh, there's actually a tradition of this work. So that's, kind of that larger connection.
Mm.
I love it. So you and Tiana do watching horror movies at a very young age. So I know if I want my niece to be a horror writer, like a talented horror writer, we need to sit down and watch inappropriate movies. I just need to get my sister on board with that.
Well, there wasn't R.L. Stine like when we were growing up. Like like there wasn't like that middle grade kind of spooky thing. So there's so much more, now. And like for people who are looking for things, let me give a shout out to Eden Royce, who writes amazing middle grade kind of spooky horror, age appropriate.
Yay. I mean, yes, and there's that too. And I wish I could grab my Eden Royce, but it's not right here. So I will drop it in the chat later on. So now is like one of my favorite parts. I would love it if y'all read an excerpt. Mateo from This Great Hemisphere, Michelle from Doll Seed, that really highlights the speculative fiction aspect. Oh wait, I didn't ask this question. Afrofuturism aspect of your work.
Ooh. How many minutes?
I will let you be the judge.
Whoa.
This Muse is ready.
Okay, I'm just gonna read a couple pages from chapter 1. And chapter 1 isn't the beginning. You know, as you were saying, Isis, the prologue begins in New York City in what we would say is 2028. Right? It's funny because there's some people who have written to me saying, why didn't you just keep the story going from there? Because if I would have at that point, it would have just been X-Men. Like, basically, it would have just been like a version. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would have just been a version of X-Men. So we jump from 2028 to 25, 29 in the forest region of the Northwestern Hemisphere. And I'm just going to read a couple pages until I find a natural stop.
Okay.
This time it would be perfect. Sweetman knelt down eye level with the crisscrossing of string that hovered above her stove. She plucked it and then clapped her hands together. Holy Father, she said, raising her closed eyes to the cabin ceiling. Please let this work. With the biogas turned on and everything in place, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen table, took 2 steps toward the door, carefully ducking under more sets of string, and in one swift motion tore through the first string, which ran from the doorknob to the network in front of her. A pitcher of sun-charged water dipped and poured into the open kettle on her stove. Then a crudely carved wooden mallet swung from the ceiling and collided with the stove's red button, igniting the biogas. The weight of the mallet pulled on a group of interlocking strings, causing a spoon with a hole drilled into its handle to fall, dropping a pinch of needle leaf into a metal strainer that sat inside an herb cup. The cup, balanced by 2 thicker strings, soared toward the stove and stopped right as the kettle tilted and poured boiling water into it. Sweetman's nails were already chewed to nubs, but that didn't stop her from obliterating them even further. She turned off the biogas and counted a full minute aloud. Then, holding the herb cup with one palm, she snipped the 2 strings that held it in front of the stove, removed the strainer, and took a sip. Perfection, she shouted, throwing a triumphant fist into the air. It was the perfect amount of water, the perfect amount of needle leaf, the perfect length of string, the perfect size herb cup. She took another sip, then ran from her kitchen to the other side of her cabin, careful not to trip on sawed wood, twisted metal, and other inventions in progress. She played a beat on the steel trunk that sat between 2 mattresses, her own unmade to the left, the other neat and untouched to the right. Sweetman shook her butt to the beat, but stopped when the sight of the untouched mattress sucked the joy out of her, as it always did. She threw herself on the couch, the sunlight from the window above warming her already warm skin. I did it. I did it. I did it, she said half-heartedly. Did what? The voice came from the other side of her door. Good morning, Rusty, she said. Come in. Sabuhub, Sweetmint. The door opened, and his scent-print rusted metal mixed with something more pleasing, like sweet potatoes roasted until the sap burst through the skin, filled the cabin. Though she heard his footsteps, smelled his smell, and sensed his remoya, or cell spirit, the life force flowing through all invisibles, unique to each of them, influencing thought, feeling, and action. She couldn't see any physical manifestation of him. This made it impossible for him to hide the small box floating behind him. What's that? She asked. The old cushion sagged as he whistled and plopped his small but sturdy frame down next to her. She heard his locks swaying against the wall behind them and watched as he placed the box, wrapped in rough brown canvas, on the trunk in front of them. Chunjani, Rusty. Oh, Mambonga for asking, Sweetman. All is well. Fresh pine and the little ones are healthy and happy. Glory, glory. She threw her arm over his bare back, kissed his cheek.
I'm sorry, it's just, you know, I do. Your Rumoya is nervous, but Namruz is a big day, maybe the biggest of your life. Exactly. Before I came in, I heard you say you did something. From the looks of the string and the cup of needle leaf on your table, I have a feeling you finally got your latest experiment to work. It's not an experiment, it's an invention. He out a series of laughs that, to anyone else, would sound like a short burst of coughing. I know, I'm just fooling with you. How many attempts did it take? She stretched her lower lip with her tongue. Took a second. Then, 27. I could have probably done it in fewer if I'd drawn it out, but I wanted to see if I could do it entirely in my mind. And what actually goes on in your mind when you're creating something? Honestly, she said, looking up at the ceiling, it's hard to say. It's like I go somewhere else, farther and deeper than anywhere I've ever been before. And when I'm there, I'm floating. I can view whatever problem I have as a puzzle. Then I begin to take it apart, piece by piece, and try to put it back together. Well, he said, his wide smile evident from his tone, you truly have a gift given to you by the Holy Father himself. Glory, glory. I'll stop there.
Mm. Yeah, that's very intriguing, and it's very different to read that, having finished the book, than the first time I read it. And like, yeah. Anyway, Michelle.
Oh my goodness. So this is so much fun. I'm just going to do a little setup. So this story is called Nucia that I'm going to read. We're in the middle of the story, and basically a humanoid group of extraterrestrials have made contact with us. They're called the Phyke, and there is a diplomatic contest held to host the first extraterrestrial in your house. It's 1970s, and Lindsay, our protagonist, who's a 13-year-old girl who lives in the black girl lives in the Bronx, has won this contest, and so she's looking for a best friend, and she's super excited about Nucia coming. However, it doesn't go quite the way she thinks. So we're in the middle of the story. The door leading to the basement was unlocked. I entered. I was sure I had slipped away unnoticed. Now that I was down here, I decided to do a little exploring. My curiosity and boredom led me underneath the stairwell to the float bed. This is where Nucia sleeps. Hearing my mother's constant refrain in my head, don't mess anything up, I carefully opened the dome of the float bed and with some effort climbed in. It was heated and immediately made me feel sleepy. I imagined what it would be like to sleep without pillows, slowly floating up and down the entire night. Phyke go into a mini hibernation each night. They sleep deeply. I suddenly heard noises from upstairs and panicked. I would get in so much trouble if anyone found me in her bed. They were already coming down the stairs. Who could it be? Mom looking for something from the freezer? No. Dad? No. The Secret Service agents? No, they rarely came inside the house anymore. They stopped at the second set of stairs leading down to the basement. I crouched, frozen in the tank.
Yeah. So Michelle and I, this is like our third or fourth conversation. I love it when you describe Nucia as Fatal Attraction meets ET, or ET meets Fatal Attraction. Yeah, and I think that scene brings out the rising tension that Lindsay will have to navigate in the situation of trying to host this extraterrestrial who is navigating their own stuff as well.
What a premise.
Thank you. Well, and I'll just say, kind of going back to your original question about Afrofuturism, I think Mateo and I would both agree that Afrofuturism allows us to tell different kinds of stories, right?
Yep.
And allows us to imagine ourselves. Because I know when I was growing up, I really didn't see, both in the media, like horror, science fiction media, just average Black girls growing up in the Bronx, and even in reading, epic fantasy, for example, in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s, there weren't a lot of characters of color.
Yeah.
So I think Afrofuturism really allows us to reimagine, putting ourselves in the center, putting, underrepresented characters in the center.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to my mind immediately is Static Shock. I loved watching
Yes.
Static Shock with my little brother when I was a kid. I think it was at least in New York,
Yeah.
Channel 9. That's the only thing that I can think about of like I don't think Static Shock and I were the same age when I was watching. I don't think he was like a kid. But if someone just like a little bit older than me, maybe one of my older brothers that had powers and could shoot electricity,
Yeah.
was empowered, right, in a way that so many of us want to be. But as you were saying, Michelle, the examples and the models were far and few in between.
I agree. I was like thinking like, what was I watching? But yeah, let's not go down the rabbit hole. So but both of the excerpts are very different, but there are like magically some similarities. So like in both of the excerpts, we have examples of young female protagonists and going into the inner workings of their mind. So Mateo, in yours, we have Sweet Mint. She's going through like making this elaborate invention, not to be confused with an experiment.
Right.
We get to see like what happens in her mind when she's doing this problem solving. Michelle, we're looking at Lindsay as she navigates like a small piece of Nucia's world, which is brought into our home. How do you get into the minds of your characters on such an intimate level?
Yeah, and as you were speaking, Isis, I realized that we both started off in the home, in their respective homes, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? It's one of the primary sites of our adventures and triumphs and failures and all of that. Maybe the main site, right, for many of us, and it holds a lot within them, like literally and metaphorically. For me, for Sweet Mint, when I was first thinking about this great hemisphere, and back then it had a completely different title, I saw a young woman and a young adult woman, and her older brother was in trouble, and I played for like, I don't know, a day with the idea that it would be focused on him. And then I said, nah, that just wouldn't be that interesting to me, right? Like my first novel, Black Buck, was full of testosterone. And make no mistake, I mean, this is a multi-POV in this great hemisphere. And one of these characters makes up for the testosterone that the other two lack. He's toxic. He's toxic. He's bad. He's a bad dude. Not in a cool way. So for me, it was far more interesting to write from the perspective of Sweet Mint. And also, I gave myself one of many challenges in that I wanted her brother, who was missing, to still feel real, even if we didn't see him right on the page in that way. In that way. So to get into the mind of Sweet Mint, I allowed her from page to page and then draft to draft to show me who she was. Of course, I can only speak for myself as the author that I am, but I do my best to allow these characters to flow through me. And then when I finish a draft and I reread it, I've gotten to know them better from beginning to end. So when I'm going back into that second draft, I'm rereading some things that I had already written about them, some things they've done, some things they've said. And because I know them better now, I can better adjust and calibrate and also understand or be more aware of what I am forcing to come out of their mouth or what actions I'm forcing, right? It all sounds a little esoteric, but we all can understand it from being in the point of creating these characters. But I will say, Sweet Mint is having a very specific experience. Her experience is different than her one of her best friends and love interest, Darksap. Darksap, like Sweet Mint, is invisible. He hails from her forest 26, which is one of many forests in the forest region, which is a region out of many regions in the Northwestern Hemisphere, which is just one out of 4 hemispheres or quadrants, right, in this world. But she is a woman in this very patriarchal oppressive society. So as I was getting to know Sweet Mint, I had to fine tune my ear, my mind, and my heart to the experiences that she would have moving through that world. And I had to also be prepared to at times get it wrong and be told by my team and people that I trust dearly if I were to have gotten it wrong. And there wasn't a lot of that, but I was definitely open to it. I was okay with getting it wrong. And yeah, so that's how Sweet Mint came about.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, Michelle, you?
Yeah, I love hearing that. I would say similar to Mateo, there's a type of refinement that happens. So I always start with a character, but I will say with this story, there's the comedian Paul Mooney, many, and he was very sharp. In the 90s, he made kind of this, he had a really funny bit, basically talking about how movies of the 80s, 70s, and 80s, alien first contact movies, like, E.T. ended up in the suburb and people were so happy overall. And like, he was like, well, what about integration? What about black people moving to your neighborhood? And so he kind of had this whole bit, and I never forgot that. But I always start with characters. And so Lindsay, I also knew that some of my emotional territory that I like to write about is girlhood and the complexities of girlhood generally, and then, Black girlhood. And so I kind of had all of that. As Lindsay was developing on the page, I could tap into personal feelings of, alienation or what it's like to be a young girl. And that's one of the few stories set in the Bronx, which is, partly where I grew up. So I had some of that architecture. But then the emotional architecture, I had to create the psyche from, like world building, and as Mateo's done a lot of world building as well. And that's where, I could really play with, okay, who are these people? What are they? How are they like us? How are they not like us? But it's really the refining and the revising on the page where you, like you said, you can't just, you're not just shoving words into, like, the characters have to come alive. There has to be something alive in that process.
Yeah, we're not like ventriloquists,
It would be so much easier sometimes. It's like, I
So
really
much
want you to do
easier.
this.
Yeah. But like those who read a lot would know,
That's fair. And I want to go back to Mateo, you saying like switching the characters we're talking about. There was a male character and he was toxic. And I was like, oh, I mean, yes, but like all of, like kind of, but they, I understood. I also like over empathize with most male characters in most books. And I don't know what that is about. So this lands to like, who gets to be the villain in your stories and why, right? And how sympathetic do you want the reader to feel for your villain?
I mean,
And that's a question for both of y'all.
Sure. And what you just said was a testament to one of my aims, because, right, we're talking about a character, Jolis, right, who is a political upstart who's running on an anti-invisible campaign. He's part of the dominant population, which, for those who are watching, means that he has visible skin, and the invisible people are relegated to second-class citizens. But the fact that you said you were still able to empathize with him was an aim for me, right? Throughout the narrative, or at least later on in the narrative, we understand in a way how he became that person. I didn't harp on it, right? But like throughout the narrative, people connect the dots, right? This is really a book, and I've always been hesitant since it came out to say this, but this is really a book that people should read twice because different experiences. You even said it, Isis, when I was reading, right? Like, because you read the whole book from beginning to end, that the beginning feels different to you now, right? That was the intention. There's a lot going on in this book. This book is orders of magnitude more complex than my debut on purpose. And because there's a lot going on, I thought that would make it a richer experience when all of the twists and the turns and the reveals are made, that if someone were to reread this, it would be an even more enjoyable experience. Because they would they would understand more of what's happening, right? So with villains, there are abstract concepts: oppression, racism, right, sexism, these various isms, but they're abstract, and the horrors of them is when they're made manifest. And I think it's important for them to be made manifest, because when we just throw around these words, it creates this distance where they're this big boogie person that can't be defeated or thwarted in any way, even though there are myriad and an overwhelming amount of concrete examples every day of all of these isms and oppression all around us, right? But we need to be able to name them. We need to be able to point at that. So in my book, we see those isms and a variety of assaults and aspersions made manifest in different ways in the very fabric of society, in the fact that Sweetman and her people live in a forest, in Forest 26, and how her mentor, the greatest inventor in the land, lives in a castle, Castle 10 Maze, and how, you know, Sweetman and her people are being read, and some of this stuff, Isis and Michelle, I wasn't afraid to be on the nose about some of this. There's other things that were more, right, abstract. And then there's other things where it's like, yes, they're being forced to eat or forced to want Rytel burger, this very unhealthy form of food that is incredibly expensive, and they need to break their backs in order to afford, when it doesn't make sense when they can raise their own crops. But there's also a growth tax, right? There's a growth tax for people that want to grow their, we're going down this path. But when it comes to the characters, I wanted there to be a reasoning for who they are, especially for more of the villainous characters. And if I've done my job, I'm not saying someone will love them, but they will better understand them. And how they became these people will be more logical, and also more understandable, in that this could happen to any of us depending on the circumstance.
Right. I think one of the biggest gifts of science fiction and speculative fiction is the ability to increase our sense of empathy for people who we would just like, we're not like them, that's not us, and distance ourselves from. So yeah. Michelle?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would say, and one of the things I'll just say for Mateo's novel that I really like, there's so many different ways of knowing in the book, and that also makes you think about the people and the villains very differently, or like how they kind of did, because it's a clash of different ways of knowing. So for Doll Seed, there are 15 stories in the collection, and they really range across paranormal, sci-fi, horror. They're at different scales, different scopes. So for me, villain, it really changes with each story. And sometimes the villain is internalization of all the negative things that that the characters have experienced. So sometimes the villain is not this external force. It's really kind of lack of self-knowledge, lack of courage. That can be villainous in how the characters kind of make decisions. But I would say one of the stories that I had a lot of conversation about at the editorial level was The Curl of Emma Jean, which is about two white sisters who are embroiled in a legal an inheritance issue, and one of them has a child, and there's some tension around what the sister thinks of the other sister who has a child, and it's really about race and identity and belonging and yearning, and the editorial team and I, we wanted people to, I felt I really advocated for that story, that it belonged in the collection. And it's subtle, and it's not easy to say. I mean, yes, on the surface, one of the sisters is racist, but there's lots of other things going on. And so I think, to me, these isms, they function at a symbolic level as well as a material level. And so some of the stories are trying to get at that symbolic nature as well as like the actual, the tangible things.
Yeah. And I think when I think about The Curl of Emma Jean, I talk about grinding Disney a lot. Michelle, you do a very fabulous in putting the reader in the mind of, if not the villain, of somebody doing borderline villainous acts, right?
Thank you.
So yes, which was as You're saying writing Disney a very delightful and enjoyable experience. Oh, great. That was the perfect time to my next question. This question is for Michele. You have stories of varying lengths, including flash fiction with writing Disney to like a novella with Nucia. How do you know when your short story is over?
Woo! I have thought about this question a bit. For me, it is a combination of going through the process of an editor's review. So whether it's, submitted formally or working in the collection, conversation with the editor, but internally, it's like, how much satisfaction and enjoyment have I given the reader? Have I done my job? Have I done have I earned the reader's respect and interest sentence by sentence? Because with short fiction, I mean, with the novel, that is also true. You have to do that. But with short fiction, your time it's compressed. And so it's really, for me, do I feel like I have done that, aside from all the punctuation, the structure, but am I giving the reader, are they, making sure they're not confused, they're not thrown out of the story at any word, at any sentence. So that's a level of, at the very, very end, when and it's sort of like it's an intuitive knowing, like obviously the objective feedback from your editor, but then there's something when you're looking at it, you're working on, you're like, okay, this is as good as I can make it. So for me, it's that combination of working with the editor and then feeling that internal click. But it takes a lot, because usually the ending is wrong. For me, in short fiction, the ending needs usually quite a bit of revision.
Through drafts. Got it.
Yes.
Yes. To get to the right ending. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hey. So fellow author Okoso is here, so I just want to say hi to them. Okay. Mateo, my question for you. So while the Great Hemisphere is over 400 pages, I enjoyed every page. There seems to be a lot of interest from readers to further explore their world. So is the novel complete? Is it part of the series? What are you thinking?
Yeah. I envisioned it as a standalone, but left it open-ended to the point where I could continue. I've played around with the idea of a trilogy and just ask myself, what would book 2 look like? What would book 3 look like? But to be completely honest, I would only write number 2 or number 3 if like an overwhelming amount of people wanted it. All right, like for me,
I want it. Well, I want it. I feel like there could be more parallel stories or in that world. Like,
overwhelming amount of people, because I'm one of these people where I write a book and I'm good, and then I'm on to something else completely different. I can't say too much about the thing that I'm working on. I really can't say anything, but yeah, mostly like one and done. With that said, though, again, I have ideas for what would book 2 and book 3 look like if we got there. So,
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like, obviously there's no commitment, but one line, what would be something in book 2? What would be something in book 3? If you feel comfortable. Again, this is no commitment.
Yeah, no, I know. I feel like anything I say right now is going to be a spoiler, but okay. Book 2. I don't know if you hear the orchestra of New York outside my window. Yep.
That's the universe affirming whatever you're about to say next. So I'm here for it.
That was like an ambulance. But anyway, okay, book 2, we would go to another hemisphere.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome.
And
yeah.
And yeah, that's all I'll say there. That's one line. And book 3, we'd probably go to maybe not another hemisphere, but another place. It just depends how wild I want to get with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, not a hemisphere, but another place.
Okay. Okay. I mean, in my heart, I was like, I know exactly where I want that place to be. But
For book
yeah.
three?
Okay, so
For book three?
yes, we'll see.
All right.
Okay, I'm excited. So it's not a no, it's not a hard no, it's a maybe.
Wait,
And I'm here for the
wait. I
maybes.
gotta ask you, where would that place be?
Oh, I mean like I don't know if it's a spoil. It's kind of spoiler-ish.
Just to start with an M.
Yeah, it's the community that like Sweet Mint takes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah. I was like, ooh, this feels like a scene out of The Matrix. Like, The Matrix. Anyway,
Yo,
y'all will,
I can't lie. Like when I was crafting the Children of Slim, eventually at one point I was like, wait a second, let me peep some clips from the Matrix because I'm feeling the underground, like it's dark and a cave. And then I looked and I was like, oh shit, this got the same DNA.
I was feeling it. I was like,
Yeah.
this, like that whole scene. I was like, this is what liberation feels like in the body. Like, and it's not like I'm reading it. Oh, I'm reading liberation. Like I like felt it like in my body somehow. And I don't know if because like it was so scent driven. It felt like a multi-sensory experience. But I was like, oh, this is what liberation feels like. Not just like here, but so that was really beautiful.
That could be the title. This is what liberation feels like.
That's a long one, but yeah.
Maybe that could just be a chapter
title. Yes.
beginning quote. Like I'd be happy with that.
Freedom.
That would make
the feeling of freedom.
yes. There you go. Oh, the creative process. Okay, so I'm realizing a couple things. One, I was really late. Two, there's a book club after this. So I have a couple questions, but we're going to skip to the last one, and then we're going to do the gist of that.
Cool.
I love this conversation so much. Y'all are so amazing. Y'all are making me feel like the cool kid. Thank you. So my last formal question before we go to this or that is, what question do you want to ask those watching? And hey, for yeah.
I would
and while y'all
love to
think
know.
about that, if you click the white arrow here, you can follow Michele Tracy Berger. You can follow Mateo. If you don't already follow Sistah Scifi, you can follow Sistah Scifi and get updates about potential book 2 or 3 of this great hemisphere, about Dalsey and the book tour and other work by Michele Tracy Berger. So just wanted to offer up that PSA. Okay, questions for the audience.
I would love to know since we are in kind of spooky month, what's people's favorite horror or spooky film or novel?
Ooh, film or novel?
Yeah, I would ask, what is a setting that is grossly ignored that you would like to see an author set a book in, or a filmmaker?
Oh wow, this is a deep one. And there's a little bit. I didn't, because there's a little bit of a delay, so it'll take a minute for like the people to like hear the question and then also type in the chat. But so yeah. So the first one, what are people watching or reading for spooky season, which I love, and setting. So we can discuss that. Well, ancestral thickums. Love that handle. So we can answer those questions. What's my favorite? I think mine's is Interview with the Vampire, the television show right now.
Oh, wow.
I love vampires.
Excellent.
So hard. Yeah.
I did not know that about you, Isis. Okay, that is, yeah, I'm gonna file it away. I have not started watching that, so yeah.
Is it like Halloween related?
It does not have to be Halloween related at all.
I'll tell you, most horror, if we're talking film or TV, most of it doesn't really hit for me. Like, it doesn't scare me, like something like Get Out scares me.
Right.
Because it's so close to reality, right? But when I was a kid,
I accidentally watched Pet Cemetery,
Ooh.
and that
Oh my
scared.
God. I knew you were going to say Pet Cemetery.
Really?
Yeah,
Yo,
because that film, I was
yo.
scared. I was like, no animals in the house.
Yo, it is so scary. I never watched it as an adult. I never will, but I saw it when I was a kid, and I was shook. I was extremely shook.
And the novel is also pretty intense. I
Really?
mean, like the novel is quite scary. Yeah, absolutely.
I
I
don't,
gotta read.
I don't think I can do it. Yeah, because that, and I was like, yeah. I still don't see anything in the comments. So in case y'all missed it, we're asking what are y'all watch? What is one of your favorite spooky season books, television shows, and or movies? Um,
Oh gosh, Attack from Mars, classic. Such a good
uh,
blend. It's horror, sci-fi, funny. Yeah.
yeah, paranormal plausibility is too much. I have not watched The Deliverance, though. Everybody's saying Glenn Close is amazing. Stranger Things for television. Let's go back to the settings question. The first thing that popped in my head was the bathroom. I don't know why, and I was like, "That's probably not what you meant by setting." But
Why not? No, it's setting. It's anywhere. Wow.
so yeah,
Imagine being trapped in the bathroom
no.
and like there's something coming out the toilet.
During the pandemic, I mean, when you think about, we were all kind of for a while in our houses, and so that whole like, I don't know if I don't know if you all felt like this, but you would look at your everyday objects because you were seeing them so often. You just like I kept thinking, oh, Stephen King is probably going to write a crazy story about like his electric toothbrush or something, like because you just kind of are seeing things in a
Yeah.
different way. So objects are kind of, but I think settings are really interesting, and just in terms of what's a setting that we haven't seen before. It's hard.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I'm like, oh, spit, no. Oh my, oh, inner earth. Oh, ocean,
I mean,
no.
one
Yeah.
that we or but one that like you feel like should get more play, where there's a lot that could be going on.
I read Nikki Drayton has Escaping Exodus, and it's set inside the body of like the equivalent of a space cow.
Ooh.
So probably inside the human body would be a very intense setting.
Someone just said under water, which is fascinating for a few reasons, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. We are going to move into the this or that. And it'll be great. Okay. Y'all ready for this or that? This is my second favorite part of the live. My first favorite part is everything we've been doing thus far. Okay. So the first one I'll admit is a this or that, because I couldn't figure out how to pick just two. Eartha Kitt Catwoman, Halle Berry Catwoman, or Zoe Kravitz Catwoman.
I'm going for the classic Eartha Kitt all the way. I'm sorry, I gotta go for
I gotta go Halle Berry.
Oh, wow. So I asked that question.
I know.
Huh? Okay. Thank you. I ask that question a lot. Eartha Kitt usually wins by a landslide, but it's usually Eartha Kitt or Halle Berry. But Halle Berry, I mean, I get it. I see it. Next one, Janelle Monáe or Erykah Badu?
Janelle Monáe.
Janelle.
I just taught her, Dirty Computer, which I had not really seen or really kind of absorbed. So that's just been in my mind. Yeah. Both are amazing.
She's just they are, but I feel like Janelle Monáe is really like part cyborg for real. I think she's really part cyborg.
She tapped into something, right? Like to create that. Yeah.
Yeah. She, you know what I'm saying? And so because I feel like that's who she really is, and she just seems so unafraid with her creation, like Erykah too, but Janelle is just like, I mean, she's spanned so many different types of music and so many different selves, right? Like from Dirty Computer to her latest iteration over the last like year or two to this like Vixen, you know what I'm saying? Like, yo, yeah, Janelle Monáe.
Yes, I agree. And I think Janelle really brings the other, the
Yup.
identity of the other into their work, like the
Mm-hmm.
queerness, the sex, like in terms of sexuality, in terms of gender, in terms of relationship queerness, which I think, they don't have
Mm-hmm.
to. They could be like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm cute, I'm hot, like, but they're really actively embracing
Yeah.
their otherness, their weirdness, and I think that's really fun. I mean, Erica does too,
Mm-hmm.
but on a very artistic
Mm-hmm.
level,
Yeah.
which is also fun. Okay, next question. Supercell or they clone Tyrone?
Okay, I have not seen Supercell, and I find they clone Tyrone so like I don't know. I feel like I need to see that again because it's so
No,
problematic
it's
on
definitely
some
problematic.
level, and I don't know. I'm like, is it supposed to be this problem? I need to see it again, but I have not seen Supercell, which I
Well,
don't
I
know.
mean, my take is that it's problematic. Like that's the way that I watched it. I loved They Clone Tyrone because yeah, it's like a flashback to the '70s where it's like tongue in cheek. You know what I'm saying? Like bringing it into the 2020s. It's like they can't be for real. You know, um, or they
And
could, but I'm gonna choose to think that they're not. But not Supercell. Wow,
mm, mm,
I
mm,
thoroughly loved
mm,
Supercell and
mm,
thought that it was masterful. The creator
mm,
Ratman has just been at it for a minute with the work that he's been doing in
mm,
British Hollywood. I love the music. I just love a lot of Black British art and
mm.
contemporary art. I'm one of these people that's like in Brooklyn watching Top
Mm.
Boy like multiple times.
Oh,
No, I'm one of
okay,
these
so
people.
you deep into it. Okay, okay.
Nice.
Like it's the second biggest genre that I listen to after hip hop. It's
Mm,
Black British hip hop and
mm,
music.
Got it.
mm,
Okay.
Someone who's watching everything Candice Cardi Williams has been putting out, Champion, Queenie, right? All of these other just amazing shows and iteration of life that connects us throughout the diaspora. There was that one dystopian joint, The Kitchen. I wasn't really
mm,
feeling all that much. Yeah, look it up. I think
Um,
mm,
the
it's called
kitchen.
The
I'll
Kitchen.
mm,
look it up. I'll definitely look it up.
It
mm.
features yeah, Kano, a
Oh,
big artist, and I thought that the acting was cool. Anyway, we're going on down in this tangent, but yeah, Supercell.
I, I love it, and I love all the other references too.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother discussion around Queenie that obviously we'll not have today. And yeah, so next question.
There's a lot we could talk about.
A lot, but not today. Octavia Butler or Toni Morrison?
I refuse. I refuse to choose. I
Toni
refuse to choose.
Morrison,
I ref-
Tony.
I want them.
In the
I want
beginning,
them
Michelle
both.
brought up realizing that the things that you were watching when you were younger and then the things you were creating when you were older were part of a tradition, right? And like without Octavia
Was
Butler,
that?
we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't feel so empowered to embrace the infinity of our imagination.
But
But I got
well, and without Toni Morrison too. I mean, because she also
yeah,
published a whole host
yeah,
of people in contemporary
yeah,
Black literature. So, and I tell people when they're, when some people are like, oh, I don't like horror or I don't like speculative fiction, I'm like, Beloved is a ghost story. It's just
yeah.
it's told at a very elevated level, like Toni Morrison. So I don't know that I was like, that is, I can't, I don't know, I can't, I need both. We gotta have both of them. I can't choose.
Real as Tony. If someone put a gun to my head, it's
Sorry.
Yeah.
it's Tony.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's probably true. If my life was at stake, okay, I'll go down that. Yeah.
And your life is not at stake, and both is totally a fine answer. So that is okay. Last question: Black Lightning or Luke Cage? And you can answer based off of the comic book or the television show. So yeah.
So I will admit that I have not seen Black Lightning. I know, like I know. It's on my list to see. So I felt like I couldn't, I did see Luke Cage.
yeah,
I liked Luke Cage. I wasn't in love with it the way that some people were, but I appreciated what it was trying to do.
yeah.
And I love a good mean Alfre Woodard, and we understand why she was mean. Like I love Alfre Woodard. So I loved her in that.
Um, my answer is very similar. I think I might have enjoyed Luke Cage a little bit more than you because just his maxim of forward always, always forward, right? Like that's stuck in my head. It's stuck in my head. So they did
Good for a writer.
Yeah, they did something right. So yeah, again, I take it here because when people bring up hypotheticals, I take them very seriously. And I think about someone having a gun to my head. I don't know why, trauma. But like, if someone had a gun to my head, it's Luke Cage.
It's Luke Cage.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, also, like, y'all are both, well, Mateo, you're in New York now, and Michelle, you were born in New York, so
Yeah.
that makes sense. I was born in Harlem, but I still pick Black Lightning just because.
Yeah.
But this was amazing. Thank you so much, Dulcie, Michele Tracy Berger, this great hemisphere. I've been pronouncing it Askaripour, and I was like, you said it, and I was like, that's not even close.
No, that's not far at all. Askaripour.
Askaripour.
You're not far.
Askaripour. That's much. Yeah. That's right. So yay, this was fun. Hopefully we'll do it again.
Love to.
Yay. Enjoy your week. And I will tell the book club y'all are the reason why I'm late, but really it's my fault. But I'm gonna blame y'all. All right.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Mateo, and thank you so much, Isis. This is great. Thank you for people hanging in there. It's wonderful.
Be well.
Yeah,
everybody.
You too.